All right, hello, welcome everybody. We're going to get started with wood windows and energy efficiency this afternoon. We're really excited to have you all here with us today. We have a really great webinar, a lot of good information to help dispel some of those myths about wood windows and their energy efficiency, right? That's usually the rationale that people give when they're removing their old or wood windows from their property. So this is, will hopefully prepare you with some information to dispel some of those myths and keep some of those wood windows in place and in those historic properties. All right, so my name is Mallory Bauer, and I have the privilege of serving as the field representative for the Michigan Historic Preservation Network. And I will kind of be the person behind the curtain, helping facilitate your participation in Zoom today. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box. That is where we'll collect them. So if you have a question, even during the presentation, to ensure you don't forget it, type it right into the Q&A. And if you can't find it, just wiggle your mouse a little bit and your toolbar should pop up from the bottom, and there will be two little blurbs, talking blurbs, and it'll say Q&A, and click on that and you should be able to type in your question there. The chat is available, but please remember to put your Q&A in the question box if you have any questions. And we will be putting links if anything comes up that we're talking about that we think you might need immediately. We'll put that in the chat. We will be doing some polls in just a moment. We just want to get a sense of who's in the audience, so please participate in those. And I hope that you will enjoy the webinar this afternoon. All right. Oh, I have the wrong date on that one. So if you are unfamiliar with MHPN, we are the statewide nonprofit that advocates for Michigan's historic places that contribute to our economic vitality, sense of place, and connection to the past. We are a membership-driven organization, so if you are not a member, please join us at www.mhpn.org. And if you are a member, thank you so much for supporting us. We really appreciate it. Additionally, we do have an annual conference every year. Usually it's in person, and we move throughout communities in the state. This year we are doing it virtually, and it actually starts next Monday and Tuesday. And registration is still open, and it'll be open until the conference, even into the conference. So if you want to check that out, there is information at our website as well about that. Your registration gets you access to all of the sessions live and to recordings of all the sessions through the end of the year. So it's a great value, and you don't have to worry about choosing between two sessions at the same time that you really want to go to. You just have to decide which one you want to attend live. This is the last in our spring-summer webinar series that has been supported by the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs. We really appreciate their support. Don't worry, we are working on putting together a few fall webinars as well. And remember to keep looking at our social media, our Facebook, and we'll have those announced there. All right, so I am going to stop sharing my screen so Dave can start getting his presentation ready while I queue up our polls. So there are two questions here today, and you do need to answer both in order to submit. So you can click which ones refer to you, and then hit submit at the end, and those will come in. So does your property have old windows or wood windows? And then why, what are the reasons for your attendance? So we have an idea. All right, so we have, right, well, I am going to end this poll. Thank you all for participating. And I'm going to share the results. So we do have a good majority of people attending who do have wood windows in their property. And then, you know, some interest in improving energy efficiency if you have those wood windows, and then generally interested in want to learn. So excellent. All right, well, today we have with us Dave Deppy. He has worked with wood windows for many years. He has conducted many demonstrations, which are our shorter hands-on workshop or hands-on educational opportunities that we offer, where there's a presentation and then the option to try out some of those skills that you learned. He came into the wood window industry through one of our 10-day wood window workshops, and he has been very generous with his time in continuing helping us with our educational efforts. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Dave.
All right, thank you, Mallory. Can you see the presentation okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to talk about several things today. We're going to talk about energy efficiency issues that older homes typically have, because there are some misconceptions out there as far as how big a part of that the windows are. And then I'm going to talk about some basic things you can do to help your window efficiency. Of course, complete restoration is always a nice thing to do, but there are a lot of things you can do without going quite to that length that can significantly improve the comfort level inside your house. If you look at old homes in general, and we're talking anything probably 1970s and earlier, typically old structures have much worse energy efficiency issues than the windows. When they were built, they were not sealed very well. The structure has deteriorated over time. Things have moved around, things have shrunk, gaps have opened up. And a lot of these structures really, they were built during a time where energy was not really particularly expensive. So they didn't pay a lot of detailed attention to energy loss. If you do have an older home, you really can't do anything addressing energy efficiency unless you have an energy audit done with a blower door test. And the reason for this is old structures have issues that maybe you don't realize are going on. And this is something you can have an energy audit contractor come in, and it's a very useful test. What they do is they put a fan in the doorway and pull a vacuum on the structure, and it's very easy to find where all the air is leaking, and it's quite an eye-opening experience, actually. They will actually measure how much air is moving through the building. And one of the great things about it is then after you do your improvements, they'll come back and run the test again, and you can actually document how much improvement you've achieved. The results of this kind of a test, it'll show you basically what the payback is for energy efficiency improvements that you might make to the house. And typically, the windows aren't very high on the list. This chart shows typical heat loss through an older home. And it's quite interesting. The windows are only 10%. Doors and door weather stripping, 11%. But you can see most of the loss is in the utilities that cause penetrations in the walls and the floors and the ceiling. It's things like the holes where the electrical wiring and plumbing go through. Things like leakage from the basement into the walls up into the attic. And these types of problems are really significant, particularly on vintage homes that have moved around a little bit, maybe have older framing that has shrunk and changed in location a little bit. So that test, what that blower door test does is it shows you exactly where the problems are and what you have to do to address them. If you do have an energy assessment done, typically they'll have an infrared imaging camera. And what this does is you can point it at your house, or you can take it into a room, point it at the corners of a room, the walls, the ceiling, the windows, whatever. And it shows you the temperature difference between the surfaces. In this particular example, this is typical of what happens with an older home. And when you're looking at this, the darker colors are where the heat is. So you can see there's a lot of heat coming through the roof, coming through the soffits. There's some heat coming around the bottom of the windows. That's because the windowsills aren't sealed properly. And then you have quite a bit of heat on the windows on the sides of the doors, probably because they're just single pane windows. But you don't see a lot of heat here flowing through the windows. And that's because typically the other areas of concern are where the problems lie. And a lot of times, people think, that when they move into a house, the first thing they think of, well, let's change the windows. And it's a relatively simple thing to do. It's quite expensive. And it's a lot easier to do that than it is to do things like correct the insulation in the walls, plug the holes between the attic and the wall cavities in the basement, insulate the rim joist so you don't have air leakage there. So replacement windows is one of the first things people think of, but probably one of the last things you want to do. And that blower door test and the energy assessment, I think that probably costs something on the order of $300 to $400. And that will tell you where to spend your money on energy efficiency. So what happens in these old buildings is you have this massive chimney effect where you have air moving through the building from the basement into the attic and then out to the outside. So I've listed some of the areas here where you have flow paths, but it does come down to some of the construction methods, balloon framing, abandoned utilities where the holes are still there, but the pipes or what have you are not there. And what this does is it causes basically a wind chill inside the house. And if you go in, if you do the energy assessment and plug all these holes, what you'll find is you can set your thermostat lower and feel just as comfortable as before. And I've actually had this done on my house, and it's quite an eye-opening experience. And it's really, I think, a very, very useful thing to figure out where to spend your money on energy efficiency. When you look at replacement windows, there's some very good window salesmen out there that will claim all kinds of things. But you do have to think back to that pie chart I showed, that 10% of the energy is all that's going out the window. So what that means is even if you boarded them up and insulated them, that's all you would save. And simply putting new windows in actually doesn't correct any of the other issues that a building typically has. Most of the heat loss through the windows is through infiltration, air leaking in to the building and then finding its way to the attic and causing this chimney effect. Not conduction. Now, single pane glass is an issue, but the best way to address that is to put storm windows on. The thermal pane glass in new windows does address conduction, but a well-sealed storm window actually gives you about the same R value. So talking about, you have this old house, you have old windows, and you're wondering what the first steps should be. Unfortunately, it's probably pretty late in the year to do anything major, but I am going to talk about a few things that can be done short of a total window restoration that will significantly improve the energy efficiency. And one of the main things you can do is install exterior storm windows. There's several different types, which I'm going to talk about. But a lot of options there. It also is relatively easy to retrofit weather stripping to the existing window sashes. And the sash is what we call the wood frame that holds the glass. And it's relatively easy, particularly for the lower sashes, to retrofit weather stripping, which will make a significant improvement in the comfort level inside the house. The other thing you can do that would be really a result of the blower door test is seal up all the gaps around the interior moldings, around the doors, around the windows. Things like if you have electrical boxes in the ceiling, you should seal the holes with spray foam where the wires go through the walls. So a lot of little things like that. So let's talk about storm windows. If you compare the R value of a brand new Energy Star rated window, they're required to have an R value of 3.3. Actually, that's only required at the center of the window, not over the whole area. Comparing that to a typical old wood window, a single pane of glass has an R value of 0.91. A 4-inch air gap, if it's well sealed, has an R value of 1. That gives you a total R value of 2.82. Part of the window is the wood frame instead of the glass, which has slightly higher R value, 1.25 per inch. And in total, this gives you an R value of the old window with a well-fitting storm of about 3. And if you have an Energy Star new window with thermopane glass, it's 3.3. That's only a 10% difference. So now we're down to talking about a 10% difference in the 10% total of the air that's lost through the windows in the first place. So you can see that the payback for replacement windows, it's a major investment, a big tear up of the house, and typically is over 100 years. When you look at storm window design, there's a couple of things that can really make a big difference in the way they look. If you look at the windows that you have, you want to make sure that the divider between the top and the bottom sash is in the same location as the original window. You want to make sure that the actual size of the glass inside the frame is the same or slightly larger than the original window. That way, it doesn't mask the look of the original window, which is really what you're trying to maintain on these old homes. And then the width of the frame should be as close as possible to the original window. So you need to think about matching the storm as closely as possible to that original window so they look nice together. So I'm going to show a few pictures here, but first, if you happen to be lucky and have existing storm windows already, the best thing you can do with those is get them repaired, get the glazing fixed, replaced, so they're well sealed, and then keep them on the house. If you have aluminum storm windows, the old aluminum triple tracks, they called them, those were fairly common in the 50s and 60s. You can actually replace the weather stripping on those, and you can obtain, a lot of times the plastic corners on the aluminum frames break. You can get all that hardware various places online and completely rebuild them if you want to. For storm window choices, you can have new wood storm windows made. They maintain the authentic look. If you're interested in maintaining the streetscape look of your house, they can be built with inserts that can be changed from glass to a screen from the inside. However, you do need to be able to open the windows to do that. The wood frame has a nice energy efficiency advantage. Aluminum frames are very good conductors of heat, so they don't tend to be particularly good for that. Typically, wood storm windows need to be custom built to match the size because you have, there's not a lot of standardization in the window world. So typically you can't find something off the shelf that you need. If you do have them built with screens and storm inserts, you'll have to have a place to store those inserts. This is a picture of a nice, this is probably the original storm window for that window, but you can see it matches the shape of the original window. It matches the width. The glass is the same size. Very nice looking. This is a little bit more of a challenge if you have the Gothic shaped windows at the top or round top windows, something like that. It's still possible to build wood storm windows for those. And this particular case, this is actually a casement window. And here again, the storm matches the shape and the location of the dividers, the size of the glass. So it looks very nice. The windows in this picture are actually wood storm windows that have changeable inserts between a screen and a glass. The one on the right matches the original window very well. The one on the left, the original window had a larger lower sash than upper sash, so that has been duplicated in the storm window. The inserts can be changed from the inside, so you don't have to get up on a ladder to do that. This is a wood storm window with the round top. My son and I just built this over the summer, and the top section is fixed glass. The bottom section has a screen and storm insert that can be changed from the inside. So that gives you some nice examples of wood storm windows. Aluminum storm windows, triple track is kind of what they're generically called. You can get them in a wide range of colors and designs. The triple tracks have screen and storm panels that slide up and down, so you don't have to store them someplace else. The problem with these is they stylistically compromise the original window. These are some aluminum storms on a historic home here in Marshall. And the problem with them is they aren't the right shape. They have this curved shape to the frame on them. You can see it a little bit better in this picture. So they don't look quite as neat and authentic as the wood storms, but you can tell by these pictures, if you paint them to match the rest of the house, choose your colors properly, they can actually look quite nice. This is another example on a historic home here in Marshall. They've done a nice job of matching the design of the original window on this. This is another nice example. These particular ones are a single pane of glass, so you can see the dividers in the original window underneath. But again, if you look closely, you can see that aluminum shape around the edge, which they have to do because the way they are extruded. Just a quick note about storm window sealing. A lot of times you'll have condensation issues, and note that if the condensation forms on the inside of the storm window, that means there's excessive heat leakage from inside the building into the cavity between the storm and the main window. If the condensation forms on the outside of the inner window, that means your storm window has excessive air leakage. And every building is different. Condensation issues can be dealt in different ways depending on the application. If you are thinking about storm windows, one of the best ways to assess how they look, take a walk around your neighborhood. You'll probably see a lot of different types, and it's a great way to compare the look to decide what you might want. I'm going to talk a little bit now about how you can retrofit weather stripping. And usually the weather stripping you retrofit is much better than what a new window has, much better quality. And just doing this can reduce leakage through the window by 70 to 80% or more. If you only do this on the lower sash is relatively easy to remove. The upper sash, not so much, but a lot of times the upper sash is painted shut anyway, and it's not going to leak air. This chart was a test that was run of a wood double hung window with and without weather stripping, and I just pulled an example off the chart. with a 10-mile-per-hour wind velocity, simply installing weather stripping reduced the air leakage through the window by 86%. Very significant improvement. This is an example of how you would retrofit weather stripping. This is a typical lower sash from a double hung window. And what you do is you route a groove. The company that sells this weather stripping is called Conservation Technologies. They sell a special router bit, and all you have to do is route a groove, and then they have a beautiful silicone bead weather stripping that just slips into the groove. What you do is you put a groove on the bottom of the lower sash, and you put a groove at what we call the meeting rail, where the two windows come together. This picture shows that location. And what that will do is do a nice job of sealing up that lower sash. Here's a closer look of what the weather stripping looks like. This is really not a difficult thing to do. The router bit is not particularly expensive, and this is a very high quality silicone material, collapses very easily, so it does a good job of filling a gap. This is a look of the same thing in the bottom of the lower sash. Now on the sides of the sash, there are a couple of options. What I like to use is this spring bronze weather stripping. And this is something that you buy in rolls, and then you can nail it to the window frame, inside of the window frame, and then that slides up against the lower sash as it raises and lowers. And it plugs the air gap, keeps the air from leaking through there. This is another style of weather stripping. This is galvanized steel. This particular type requires routing a groove in the edge of the window, and then the window slides up and down on that metal piece of weather stripping. This actually, both of these styles of weather stripping, you may actually have them on your house already. It was very common in the 20s and 30s for people to hire somebody to come in and retrofit this on their original windows. There also were quite a few windows in the 30s and 40s that were sold new with this type of weather stripping on them. So it was kind of an early development before the rubber and plastic materials that we have today were in vogue. This is what the spring bronze weather stripping looks like. Comes in a typically 100-foot roll, and you attach it with copper nails. There are a couple different sources of this out there online, and I've actually used this quite extensively when I do a complete window restoration. That's what I'll use. This last slide is a list of sources for some of the materials that I use in both window restoration and the energy efficiency. So that's the end of the formal presentation, and I just want to kind of reiterate again, it's very key to have that energy analysis blower door test done to understand the most economical or the best place to spend any money you want to spend on energy efficiency. It's quite an eye-opening thing, and I guarantee you will learn things about your house if you do that you never knew were happening. There are major areas of concern around the rim joists, around fireplaces, up through the walls, especially if you have balloon framing, that are relatively easy to fix with some cans of expanding foam and caulking, filling holes. If you have old windows and you want to try and make some efficiency improvements, retrofitting the weather stripping to the lower sash is probably one of the easiest and most effective things you can do. However, before I do that, I would take a serious look at storm windows. The great thing about the storm windows is that when you put those on, it protects the original window from the weather. And that way, if you don't have time right now to restore it or do some repairs on it, at least the storm window is preserving that for a time when you would be able to do that.
All right, thanks, Dave. All right, so now we wanted to leave a lot of time for Q&As. We did have the opportunity for people to send photographs of any windows that they had questions about. No one took us up on that, which is perfectly all right. But if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A at this moment. All right. Okay, so we have a question that came in that says, our old windows are painted closed. Is this good or bad?
That's a very common occurrence on old houses. And actually, if they're painted closed, you're not having any air leakage through them, most likely. So that's a good thing from an energy efficiency standpoint. You're still going to benefit from putting storm windows on because you do gain the additional R value of the extra window and the air gap.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay. Any recommendations? Oh, so we've been talking about cool weather, and so the heat going out. So this is a question about hot weather. Any recommendations for dealing with hot weather, tinted storms, etc.?
Hot weather, well, one of the things that we need to keep in mind is during the winter time, if you look at the temperature difference between the inside and the outside, it can be up to if you have a 0-degree day and you're 70 inside, that's a 70-degree temperature difference. In the summertime, it might be 100 degrees outside and you want to have it 75 inside. That's only a 25-degree temperature difference. So the air leakage issues when you're in air conditioning season aren't quite as much of an issue just because of that temperature difference. But the things that we're talking about for keeping cold air out are also the same things that you would do to keep cold air in.
Right. And I would like to note, when wood windows were, being used all the time, people also had shutters on the outside of their house that they would, the levered so they could close it. So it allows air circulation, but not the heat coming down. So if you want some nice shutters or like some interior curtains that can kind of help, I think that is also helpful for that type of loss. Would you agree, Dave?
Yes, that would be very helpful.
All right. So we do have a question about finding a contractor to build wooden storms. So I'll first do a quick plug for the Michigan Historic Preservation Network has a Historic Resource Council directory. And these are professional members for people in the historic preservation trades and professions, and they advertise through this. I will put a link in the follow-up email to this directory so you can refer to that. Of course, we always recommend getting doing your due diligence, so getting estimates and really making sure you're finding the right person for your project. But David, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Well, I think if you want to try and find somebody to build wood storms, you need to talk to somebody who does window restoration because a new construction type contractor won't have any idea what you want typically because they only deal with new materials. And really you need to find somebody who's good at dealing with older materials. There are a couple people in the area that I have actually taught how to build wood storm windows. Is it okay if I mention a couple names?
I'll let you name drop.
Okay. Well, but you know, if you go out, say you do an internet search, you want to look for window restoration contractors or general restoration contractors. There's a company in Grand Rapids, I believe it's called Heritage Window Works. There's also a company in Jonesville that's a restoration company run by Tim Bowman. And there's a company, North Coast Windows in Kalamazoo. And two of those three people actually took my class on how to build wood storm windows. And a couple of those pictures I showed are windows that I built. So that's what I would recommend.
So Dave, though, are you taking projects?
Well, actually, I'm not because I have too many of my own properties that I'm restoring and maintaining. So right now, I'm just doing them privately, I guess you'd call it.
Yes. Oh, um, and Dave is located on the west side of the state. So there are more contractors throughout the state if you're looking for someone in your area. Um, Excellent. We'll move on to our next question. So
Okay.
the latest project, our HDC reviews used safety as the major reason for replacement as opposed to energy, which was kind of a secondary argument. So how can you improve the safety without replacing the windows? So I guess I would have a follow-up question was like the safety argument due to opening or closing of the window? Was it because of potential lead-based paint? If you want to type in a follow-up or into the chat, I think we can. I think I need more information before we can answer that one. Do you agree, Dave?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. So if you could type in a little bit more information, we'll come back to that question. That is a good question. All right, so we have storms, but there is some wood rot and also shift in the lower sash. What are your thoughts?
It depends on how bad the wood rot is. The last seminar I did, I actually talked a little bit about replacing rotted wood, and the old windows. It's not particularly difficult to do. It kind of depends on how bad it is. There also are some pretty decent wood hardeners and epoxy wood repair products out there, which if it's a small area, you can do something like that. The great thing about these old wood windows is they're designed to be rebuilt. They're not glued at the corners, so you can typically drill the corner pins out, take them all apart, fabricate new wood pieces, and put them all back together.
Yeah, excellent. If you have a follow-up to that, do feel free to type that into the Q&A. All right, so my wood windows were ripped out by a previous owner and replaced with vinyl. Would replacing them, so going back to wood, increase their efficiency?
It all depends on how good a job they did putting the new windows in. A lot of times when new windows are installed, the other issues with air infiltration are not corrected. So they actually aren't any more efficient than the original old. So it's really kind of a case specific thing. The new windows do have thermopane glass. Depending on what condition the old windows were in, the new windows might have weather stripping where the old windows didn't. And oftentimes when new windows are put in, all they do is they take the sashes out and then drop a new window unit in the existing window frame. If that's all they've done, it's not that big a job to go back to the wood windows. If they've completely taken out the window frame, then there's really not a good way an easy way to do it.
Right, because you'd have to rebuild that.
Right.
And it could be a thought for when those vinyl windows eventually fail, as we know they do
Right.
have a lifetime. You could choose to replace with wood windows again if that's something that you would like to do.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Um, could you speak to the differences a little bit more in depth between the interior and exterior storms? Is one better than the other? I mean, you did mention that interior storms are a bit safer because you can put them up from the inside. You don't have to climb up a window, but could you spend a little bit more time talking about those differences?
Okay, the type of windows I was talking about with inserts, actually the storm window is mounted on the outside. But in order to change it from a screen to a storm, you go inside, you open the window, and there's actually a removable insert that's held in, and you remove the retention method. Take that, so you take your screen out, and then you put a window in its place. So they're still exterior storms, but they have inserts in them that can be changed without getting up on the ladder. And the typical thing with storm windows was you'd take them off and you'd put your screens on the outside in the spring, and then you'd take the screens off and put the storms back on in the winter. And what these inserts do is they allow you to do that job without getting up on your ladder. So basically the window frame for the storm is permanently attached.
Right. So then you don't have to, yeah, take that off on and off. It stays on all year, but the bottom half, right? Because usually people are only using the lower sash, not the
Right.
upper sash.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when we talk about aluminum triple tracks, what they actually have is they have a slide arrangement where to put the screen in, you just slide the glass window upward and it hooks in place, and then you slide the screen down. So the nice thing about that is that they actually store the inserts for you. You don't have to put them anywhere else. They just stay right on the window.
Got it. And have you worked with interior storms? I feel like interior storm products are not like the thick wooden frame that you would see on an exterior. Have you worked with interior storms at all? And what are your thoughts?
I actually have interior storms. Typically, we would look at if you have casement windows rather than double hung, because it's basically impossible to put an exterior storm window on a casement window if you still want it to open.
Okay.
I've not actually used interior storms on a double hung window, and the disadvantage of them is the great thing about the exterior storm is that it seals the whole cavity from the outside. So it seals any leakage you have around the frame, it seals any leakage you have around the ropes. It basically seals all that up from the outside. And when you do the interior storm, you still have the potential for all that air leakage, which adds to that chimney effect, pulling heat out of the building.
Right. And I can also see the benefit of, the exterior storms because your glazing faces out. So it goes back to the storms are protecting the original windows a little bit longer, and your glazing, I assume,
Mhm.
stays in better condition because it's not seeing that weather.
Right. Yeah. And I think typically interior storms are more for casement windows than for double hung in general.
Excellent. We did have a question come in asking what caused you to decide to go into wood windows and start your business and then also train others.
Well, I went to I think it was the first wood window workshop that MHPN had many years ago. It must have been 6 or 7 years ago now. And for 2 weeks, we did hands-on practice on restoring windows. And I've been a woodworker my whole life. And it was being taught by people that were professional window restorers. And they told us for 2 weeks, there aren't enough people around that know how to do this. We are covered up with business. And so I thought, well, that's something maybe I should try. And based on my experience at that workshop, I started the business and very quickly became very busy. because there really aren't a lot of craftsman type people doing this type of work. And if you called a window restorer now and asked them to build you some wood storm windows for this fall, they would just kind of laugh. These people are very busy. So I thought it was a good business opportunity. And then after I had done it for 2 or 3 years, MHPN actually started asking me to come and talk about storm windows. And it just kind of progressed from there. And then I ended up, being an instructor for 2-week workshops. But actually, looking at the total business that I did, I had it for 5 years. And probably 85% of my business was making wood storm windows. And 15% of it was restoring and repair. And I probably only had in that 5-year period 2 houses where I went in and redid all the windows at the same time. So the wood storm window business turned out to be the big item in that.
And that was, I'm sorry, that was building new storm windows and then also repairing old storm windows?
It was always new storm windows.
New storms.
It was always cheaper to build a new one than it would have been to repair the old one, because usually by the time the storm window is that bad, it takes more time to repair it than it does to build a new one.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. MHPN always advocates for trades training. As Dave said, we are incredibly short on tradespeople for the amount of work throughout the state. So we haven't done a 10-day wood window workshop in several years now. That was through a grant. But we do full day, so 8 hours, what we call hands-on wood window workshops, where we bring in an instructor like Dave to be there for 8 hours, and we try to get it on a property that there's wood windows that need to be taken out. So you learn how to take out the sashes, rehang the weights, reglaze, remove paint, all of the good stuff. So if you're interested in something like that in your community, when we're able to meet in person, or we can socially distant, do that socially distant, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk to you about how we can schedule that. Because it's a lot of important information and a huge need for it. I get questions all the time of, who do I reach out to rehab my windows or make storms? And there's a lot of work in that industry. Thank you for sharing your background story with us. So what suggestions do you have for making casement windows that open outward more efficient? So we kind of touched on that with the interior storms. Do you have any other suggestions?
Casement windows are a little bit of a different challenge. But you can retrofit weather stripping to those as well. You might use some slightly different products than what you use on the double hungs, but actually the energy conservation technologies has several different types of weather stripping that you can use for casements. But as far as storm windows go, it's a little more complicated because, well, if you want to have a screen, a lot of times if you put a screen on the inside, then you can't reach the handle to open and close the window. It depends on the design of the window. Many casements actually are designed with slots on the inside for installation of a screen in a storm. So it depends somewhat on what your windows are. I know a lot of the metal frame type windows that were made in the 20s and 30s, they actually have recesses on the inside that are there specifically for storm windows and screens. The other way to address it would be to build a nice looking wood frame storm window that fits on the inside.
All right, thank you. All right, so the individual who asked about the safety argument in terms of replacing their windows did respond with some follow-up information. Thank you very much. Citing that the safety for the reason to need to remove the old windows was lead paint, failing hardware, the single pane glass, and the location of the window, which is 4 inches from the ground. And then I guess I have another follow-up question about the location for the 4 inches from the ground. Were they asking for the lower, the sill to be moved up? Was that part of their application? So if you want to address some of the other issues for safety, if people can improve the safety without replacing the windows. And they replied, no changes to the shape, just wanted tempered glass.
Right. Well, you can put tempered glass in the old windows.
Oh.
Just order the size that you need. Sometimes, if it's a lot of times the tempered glass is a little bit thicker, a little bit heavier, so you might have to adjust the size of the balance weights. But then that brings it up to the same performance as a new window if you have the tempered glass. So particularly if you have a window that is 4 inches from the floor, yes, you could put tempered glass in that, and then it would probably meet current code.
Right. And then addressing the issue of, failing hardware, right, we can always replace hardware. Of course, there's work that goes into that. And then we have not yet mentioned lead paint with the old windows. Dave, is there anything that you would like to talk about regarding lead paint and safety?
I think it's something that people definitely need to be aware of. It's also something that you need to make sure that if you hire a contractor to do some work, that they are aware of that. The big risk with lead paint is when you start to disturb it. So if you take the lower sash out, you are going to make some dust. However, there are well-developed methods that contractors use to control that, to minimize the risk. And as long as they're using the EPA recommended procedures and they're a certified lead paint contractor, there really should not be a safety issue there.
Right. And in following that up, MHPN and the State Historic Preservation Office does have a little booklet that when we're traveling around, we usually have physical copies, but there is a digital copy located on our website. Everyone will get a follow-up email with a one-pager containing helpful links, and there will be a link to that, that pamphlet in that one pager, and that is it's about lead safety for homeowners. So what you need to know if you're doing small repairs so you can work lead safe. As Dave said, lead paint is a concern. We don't want to minimize its or diminish its potential to be hazardous. But if you are not disturbing it, so it's not getting into the air, into the to be breathed in, it shouldn't be a danger. And you can also encapsulate it. So if you're putting on another layer of paint, that's putting another barrier between the lead-based paint. So definitely something to be aware of and to know whom to contact to make sure that you're keeping property occupants safe. So we have a quick question about, is this webinar going to be available for viewing afterwards? And we are recording this webinar, and a link will be included in the follow-up email, and it'll be housed in our YouTube channel. If you've missed any of our wonderful spring summer webinar series, they all live on our YouTube channel. So I would encourage you to check it out. We did have some really fun ones about agricultural history in Michigan. We had a brick masonry conversation. We've had many SHPO staff on to talk about the programs that they offer. So it'll be a wealth of knowledge. But yes, this a recording will be available for future. I think this might be our last question. So we might have time for one more after this. So if you have a question, quickly get it in. But if you are working on your own window restoration, do you find that your local hardware store has what you need? How about the superstores, or do you have supply catalogs you like?
It's kind of typical of restoration work. None of the home centers carry anything you need. Your local hardware store, unless it's very unusual, doesn't carry what you need. So everything I get is from online sources because apparently there's not enough demand for these materials to justify anybody stocking them. And it's things like window glazing, glazing hardware, the weather stripping materials that I've talked about, some of the paints that I use. So just general materials like that, and some of the specialty tools. There are some nice specialty tools for window restoration that you can't buy at Lowe's or Menards, so you have to order them online.
All right. Well, we have gotten through all of our questions today. Dave, or before I wrap up with a few brief reminders, are there any parting thoughts that you would like to provide to our attendees today?
I think the only thing I would say is it's very important to try and preserve and save your original windows. They're made out of much better materials than anything you can buy today. They contribute significantly to the appearance of your home or your building. So I encourage everybody to take that path and do what's right to keep them serviceable.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for attending. Again, this was our last in our spring summer series. That means that fall is nearly here. We will be having a few more webinars this fall. So keep in contact with our website, www.mhpn.org/workshops/ is our quick link to find out what we have going on for our webinars. Additionally, another reminder that our conference is next Monday and Tuesday, and we have a lot of really phenomenal sessions. We do have a track, and of course it's going to escape me the technical term, but it's about tools and like more tradespeople. So we have how to look at structural issues with properties. We have high-tech tools to use when you're restoring properties, in addition to things like solar panels in local historic districts. So something for everybody, and registration is open, and you can find out more at our website. I do hope you will join us. And if you have not already liked or followed our social media, we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, and we are on Twitter as well. Again, thank you all for your time. It's 1:59, so we're ending right on time. And we really appreciate all of your support. And thank you again so much, Dave, for your time. We really appreciate it. There's been many comments coming into the chat, into the Q&A, saying thank you for sharing your expertise.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for asking.
Always a pleasure. So have a good afternoon, everybody, and we'll see you in our next webinar series.